Well, hello and happy new year, everyone. I hope the year has started off wonderful for you so far. I wish you all the very, very best in 2025. This is the first podcast that I am recording in the new year. It's not played first, but it's the first actual one I've recorded. I always have record a few ahead so I don't get caught behind and I can take time to create what I think is compelling content. So happy new year, because this is the first one I've recorded in this year. This one today comes from a listener, and I really appreciate the feedback. He was giving me some feedback on the show and was saying that one of the things he'd really love to hear is more about what secure attachment looks like. And to his credit, we do a lot of talking about insecure types of attachment. Anxious as well as avoidant, and some disorganized as well. And rightfully so. I guess that's part of my training, is to focus in on where the problems are to make things better. But I certainly get the idea behind, hey, let's not minimize what healthy relationships look like either. And sometimes making those comparisons can be illuminating for us as we evaluate our own relationships. So thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. And this episode, we are going to focus in on what healthy relationships look like, and more importantly, what secure attachment looks like as well. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host, and as a therapist, I spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their trauma so they can repair their ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I mentioned in the opening of the show, we're going to really try to focus in on what secure attachment looks like in relationships. And I'm going to do this by talking about secure attachment across 5 different relational buckets, if you will. 5 different aspects of a relationship that I think are really important. The first one is the need for closeness and intimacy versus the need for distance and independence. This is something that all relationships struggle with. How do we balance the need for closeness and intimacy with the need for some distance, some space, some agency and independence within that relationship as well? So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is the ability to communicate our emotions and needs, and to understand the needs and emotions of our partner. Some people struggle with this particular aspect of it. Certainly we can see that in some insecure types of attachment. But what does this particular bucket look like from a secure attachment standpoint? We're going to explore that in just a few minutes. The third bucket we're going to talk about is style of responding to conflict. How do people handle conflict? And sort of intuitively, your own style might come to mind when I even mention the idea of conflict in our relationships. You probably know that about yourself, but what does that look like from a secure standpoint and a secure attachment style? The fourth bucket is the internal working model of self and partner. So what are these internalized images and models that we use when we start talking about our relationships, about ourselves and our partners? And these are sometimes the lens in which we view ourselves and our partner through. So these models we use are really important because they can often drive the bus behind our ability to be open and vulnerable versus our ability to be more closed and defensive. So we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And then finally, a bucket that I call the reflective function. Very, very important in terms of our attachment style is our ability to be able to reflect on our own feelings, reflect on our own behaviors, and be able to some degree to accept responsibility for what we feel and how we act in our relationships. So those are the 5 different buckets that we're going to talk about as we explore what secure attachment looks like. Let's dig in. All right, as I mentioned, the first one is the need for closeness and intimacy versus the need for distance. Now, secure attachment means that we are comfortable with both. So, in secure attachment, we are comfortable with warm and close relationships. We can depend on our partner, and we can allow our partner to depend on us. If our partner feels like they need some distance, it doesn't trigger our sense of abandonment. Or if it feels like they need a sense of closeness and intimacy, it doesn't feel like we're being overwhelmed or smothered or engulfed by our partner's needs either. So there is flexibility within the secure person's style in terms of how they manage the need for closeness and intimacy versus the need for independence. If our husband goes on a golf outing with his buddies for the weekend, we aren't lost. We aren't feeling alone. Our traumas aren't triggered in terms of our fear of abandonment and rejection. We don't feel cast aside. And when he comes home, we don't feel like we have to make up for that time or interpret any of his behaviors as having rejected or abandoned us over the weekend. We can delight in the fact that he had fun, that he got to spend some time with his friends, and we can be happy for him in that. And conversely, if as guys, we can delight in our partners, our female partners, being able to go off and spend a weekend trip with the girls, and we don't feel lost or abandoned ourselves. And we don't feel like, oh, good, finally, she's out of my hair. I can do whatever I want that I normally don't get to do when she's around. And so we don't like take advantage of that time because we don't feel like we're being smothered when she is around. So I'm trying to hit different perspectives here, as you can probably tell, from an anxious or avoidant type perspective. When we're secure, we can celebrate our partner's need for independence, their need for agency to act in ways that they feel like is consistent for them. And we can also celebrate their need for warmth and closeness and dependence and affection at certain times as well. So I think the key phrase here is flexibility. The securely attached individual has the flexibility to be there for their partner when they need closeness and to be there for their partner, to respect it when they need some distance and independence. So if I get into a conflict with my partner and she needs a few moments to gather herself, to think about things, or we get to a point where we've just sort of run aground in our conflict and we don't know what else to say, I don't need to chase my partner from room to room trying to get her to open up or trying to get space on my own. There's a general respect for the time when we want to come together and talk about it, and a general respect for when we need some distance as well. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what secure attachment looks like when we start talking about closeness and intimacy, as well as need for emotional distance. Okay, the second bucket, ability to communicate emotions and needs and understand the emotions and needs of our partner. This is really crucial because the securely attached individual is able to communicate what they're feeling and their perspectives and the needs behind those feelings. They can also understand the needs and feelings of their partner. So again, the key word here is flexibility. Does it mean that I as a partner never get defensive? Or does it mean that I never have to take time to kind of explore what am I really feeling? What's going on here? No, it doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that generally I'm able to communicate to my partner, hey, here's what I'm feeling that really hurt, and I need you to hear this because I want us to be able to come together over this feeling so that I can have empathy and understanding for that. And I can communicate to you in a way that you can get that. that you can understand. And I realize that the onus as a partner is on me to try to be able to communicate what I'm feeling and my needs in a way that you don't have to read my mind. I'm not going to try to make you guess, and I'm not going to try to shut down and pull away so that you have to pull it out of me. Rather, I've got the internal flexibility to be able to show up, to own my own feelings, and to be able to express the needs behind those feelings, the needs I have in a relationship. And just as importantly, I'm able to accurately perceive the needs of my partner. And so that's a little bit about what a securely attached individual would look like when we start talking about the ability to communicate emotions and needs, as well as being able to understand our emotions and needs from our partner or in our partner as well. With that is a lot of empathy and validation. And if you've ever heard this podcast before, I'm real big on empathy and validation because I really believe it is the oxygen that fuels a close, connected relationship. So when I'm able to understand my partner's needs and feelings, then it makes them be able to breathe deeper and to feel like they are being seen and heard, and that they can be appreciated and known for who they are in this relationship. So closely connected with that, and I won't go on a tangent here today about it, but closely connected with this particular bucket is the ability to be able to empathize and validate my partner in what their needs and feelings are, as well as being able to solicit that in times for my own needs and my own feelings. All right, let's talk about style of responding to conflict. So a securely attached individual, as you might guess, first of all, doesn't try to seek conflict. They're not highly conflictual. They're not constantly trying to get their needs met through criticism or contempt of their partner, but they don't avoid conflict either. So if I'm looking at a couple on a couch and they're securely attached, oftentimes what I see is that both partners are open and willing to discuss the issues at hand. They're able to both focus on the issue by being able to empathize and validate each other's opinions, perspectives, needs, and feelings as it surrounds that particular issue. Even if it's a difficult issue where it doesn't feel like there is a certain or a quick resolution to the problem, they are able to manage it in such a way that they don't actually create more hurts on top of the issue itself. And this is what I see a lot when I start talking about more insecure styles of attachment, is where if an issue comes up in the relationship, it is then discussed in a way where the conflict can actually create bigger ruptures in the relationship. And if those ruptures continue without the repairs necessary, and that goes on for quite some time, it creates bigger and bigger forms of disconnection and miscommunication. So the style of responding to conflict with a securely attached individual is they're able to sit with their partner's feelings. And this dips a little bit into the other bucket I was talking about. But they're able to acknowledge and sit with their partner's feelings. They do not feel the need to try to minimize, distort, or change what their partner is feeling, or to quickly somehow try to just make it better for them so that it takes the heat off of that particular partner. They can withstand a little bit of feedback, even though it might not feel good always. If your partner's coming to you and saying, hey, this really hurt my feelings, you're able to sort of go, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I was so thoughtless about that. And I can see why that hurt you, and be able to sit with those hurt feelings long enough to be able to repair them. Because part of the anxious person's or the avoidant person's need to handle conflict is to continue the criticism and not be able to internalize the empathy that you might get for voicing your opinion if you're an anxiously attached person, or the sheer avoidance of any kind of conflict by shutting down or emotionally removing yourself from the conflict. So there is flexibility. Again, I keep going back to this word because I think it's so important. One of the most distinctive features, in my opinion, of a secure style of attachment versus either of the insecure styles is the ability for flexibility, internal flexibility. Does it mean I never shut down during conflict? No, that's not what that means. Does it mean I don't ever try to make things better for my partner? No, that's not what that means. It means I just have the flexibility to be able to show up and to listen and to not avoid it on any sort of a consistent basis. And so with my partner, I'm actually able to attune to them even when things are hard and muddy and uncomfortable, to a point that we can repair whatever that conflict is. And so that's coming from a more secure style of attachment. All right, let's move on. Internal working model of self and partner. So what kind of lens do I often look through when I am looking at my relationship, especially during times of distress, right? Because keep in mind, our styles of attachment only come out when there is a threat, an emotional threat, a feeling of disconnection, disruption, ruptures without the repairs. That's when these styles show up. So a secure style is able to look through the lens that of their partner that is more understanding, more compassionate, more empathic. They almost have an internal voice that says, well, we're in a rupture right now, but I know we'll figure this out. I know my partner still cares about me. I'm going to act and behave and speak in ways that don't add further hurts and further pains to this particular conflict. We have a history of working these things out, and I know that about us. We've got a big buildup of money in the bank of times that we've made repairs and felt closer and connected and worked through some differences in our relationship. So I know we've got a good foundation that we're building on there. I know my partner cares about me, and my partner is important to me, so I'm not going to shut down or I'm not going to criticize. I'm going to act in ways that are consistent with who I am and what I believe in this relationship and what I believe this relationship can be. So our internal working model accepts partners' needs for independence. It's not overly upset about relationship issues. Right? So if our partner says something, I don't fly off the handle and I don't pout for days at a time. I'm rather able to express that, well, that hurt my feelings, or that didn't feel very good when you said that. And we can work these things out right then and there. I can also give my partner some sense of grace and compassion for when they misspeak or when they say something in anger that might be hurtful. I recognize that, oh, well, that was said when we were in a bad place, and I understand that. And if you tell me that you didn't mean it and you only did it sort of in a defensive posture, I can believe that. I think also with internal working models of self and partner, there is a sense of trust in the securely attached person. I trust my partner wants to be there for me. I trust and my partner trusts me as well, that we want to work these things out. And there's not a level of mistrust that often drives my more insecure styles of attachment. And I can use that lens of trust to help repair things when they happen. And there's a sense of forgiveness, I think, as well as the ability for the couple to come together and have insight about what happened in the relationship so they can learn from it and they can grow together. But all of that comes from a lens of the way I view myself as well as the way I view my partner. And finally is the reflective function. So in the reflective function, a securely attached individual, they're able to reflect on their thoughts and feelings. They're able to tolerate negative emotions long enough to understand the meaning behind them. They're able to differentiate their perception of events as one of multiple interpretations of the event. And I want to emphasize that there, that's really crucial. Oftentimes, the securely attached person knows that their feelings and perceptions are subjective to them, and that their partner might have a different perception of that. And in their conversations and in their conflict resolutions, they leave enough room to understand that this is my perception of what happened, and I just need my partner to meet me here and validate and understand that this is my perception of it, and to take that seriously, along with the understanding that they might perceive things differently. And there's room there, there's space there, that my perception is not the only perception that can exist. And so that's kind of what the reflective function is it's this ability for the securely attached person to recognize and leave enough room in the conversation, in meaning making of the relationship, that it's not just one person's meaning that defines what the relationship is or looks like, or what it looks like moving forward, but rather there can be multiple meanings, and it's how we come together and overlap those meanings that creates a shared experience of what we're going through. So the ability to differentiate perceptions of events as one of several interpretations, or one of the interpretations among many of that event, is really crucial, as well as the ability to understand behavior of others, and the ability to understand one's intentions and motivations. I know my partner said something that was hurtful, but I also recognize that they weren't trying to hurt me. Their motive and intention wasn't to purposely hurt me, but rather in that they were trying to get their own needs met, or they were trying to figure out and sort out what they were feeling. And sometimes that just gets played out in the relationship in ways that might bump up against one partner or the other and hurt them, but there's not the intention behind that. So the reflective function can also be looking beyond the content of what is said in a relationship to understand the process of what can happen and play out, that we can get caught sometimes in these cycles that causes us to say things or feel things a certain way that aren't always indicative of our relationship as a whole. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit about what secure attachment looks like. I could go on and on probably, but I think this gives you a pretty good idea, especially when we break it down across these different buckets that play out in our relationships. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. As always, I love the feedback. If you have something that you'd like to hear, something that you want me to drill down or be more specific on, please shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.